When something like glory was offered to me, and it was a field that, well, does a woman really know how to capture a war film? And I thought, watch me. And then it came about, well, is she too young to do this? Watch me.
I'm Jazz Tankay, Artisans Editor at Variety, and I'm thrilled to be here today for this Black Women of Award Season conversation with costume designers Francine Jamison-Tanchuck and Charlese Antoinette Jones. Francine has most recently created the costumes for Regina King's One Night in Miami, and Charlese has worked on the Judas and the Black Messiah. Walk us through what it was like creating those costumes for Judas and the Black Messiah.
The majority of the clothing was actual dead stock vintage and sourced because I had a really short prep. And, as much as I would have loved
I know
to build,
about that. Charlie.
yeah, it's like you want to build everything, right? You're like, I'm doing a period film, I'm gonna
Right.
build everything. And then they're like, here's your budget and here's your prep. And you're like, oh no, I'm not. I'm only building special things. And everything else is going to be dead stock vintage or pulled from costume houses. And it's going to be great. The things that we were able to build, like we recreated the fabric and the print of Chairman Fred's shorts that he was killed in. And we built those. The robe that Deborah was arrested in, we redesigned that fabric as well and printed that fabric and cut and sewed that robe, so there were specific things that we wanted to be accurate. A lot of the pieces were actually us taking photographs of, the Panthers during that time, the Young Patriots, the Young Lords, and breaking down the photo and every piece of clothing in those photos and being like, okay, so this person has on a guayabera shirt with a cardigan, and this person has on bell bottoms, and just really breaking down these photos and getting those key pieces in for, each of those groups, like the Panthers. Okay, the Panthers wore a lot of leather, but our Panthers specifically in Chicago were wearing World War II camo jackets. How we discovered that? Studying the photos, looking at all the camo jackets, in the costume house and figuring out which war, those camo jackets were from. And then just like finding them from all over the place, all over the world, eBaying like crazy, finding vintage pieces. And that's the part of my job that I love. It's so much fun, like the procuring and the research. In total, our principals, including stunts, it was about 117 principals, and we had a background count of a total of 1,000. And every single person in the background had to be dressed head to toe. So we were fitting people like 12 hours a day, every single day, and then I would have to send the photos out for approvals. It was nonstop from the time we started shooting until we wrapped. And I mean, but it pays off, the preparation pays off. The time that we took, even though, like I said, we had a really short prep window, the plan, that we had worked.
Costume designers, I feel we're constantly we're constantly pushing an envelope in a way. And we really don't know that we are because we are pulling off things and we're able to accomplish those things in very little time, and they're looking pretty wonderful or something on screen. And now you're saying with people, oh, maybe we can give them less time to prep.
Right.
Since they're pulling this off in 6 weeks, maybe they don't need 6 weeks. Maybe we can do it in 5 weeks or 4 weeks now. It's a recipe on how to kill off a crew.
Mm-hmm.
I would not recommend that you do that.
Francine, what about for you? What was it like creating costumes for these historical figures who are so well photographed? There's so much out there about them. Like, talk about your process for One Night in Miami.
For One Night in Miami, it was the mid 60s and dealing with a historical men again. I worked with Jim Brown on a film that I was an assistant a long time ago called Running Man. And so I remember him from that. So I had a little bit knowing him somewhat. My dad was a huge Sam Cooke fan, huge. So I remember just watching, look, he would put on Sam Cooke, and he had album after album after album. And so I remember Sam Cooke on the front of these albums and how he would just look so wonderful and so handsome. And then some years ago, I had the opportunity to assist another designer many years ago called Bernie Pollock on a film called Electric Horseman. And we shot that movie in Las Vegas. And during that time, there was a tribute to Joe Louis. And every boxer known to man, I think, was there. And Muhammad Ali in his wonderful tuxedo we saw coming through the lobby. So I have those memories, and with the research and just knowing that beautiful era of the 60s. And I'm sure, Charlese, you saw a lot of things, footage that in the 60s in certain eras, you don't have a lot of the luxury of color. You're dealing with black and white photographs. So, with that in mind, it was great also to read certain captions that journalists and photographers would say, oh, look at Sam Cooke in his wonderful silver suit, that kind of thing. A lot of their outfits had to be built because, number one, we were trying to recreate that particular iconic historical part where they were in their hotel. And this was at the evening of the Sonny Liston fight. But Regina King and I just sat with fabrics and looked at different fabrics, and I would let her know that sometimes you cannot always tell with a black and white what those fabrics are. You can look at the texture, and I love the texture of things. So you try and also consider the talent, the guys that are playing that part, and what colors would look the best on them as well. And looking at Leslie Odom's complexion is probably a little bit deeper than the real Sam Cooke, but Leslie's complexion was, some colors were looking just exquisite on him. And of course, I had to recreate that beautiful silver suit. And Regina and I decided that the burgundy shark skin would be the best for Sam Cooke's iconic suit. We really didn't know what the color, but color looks so wonderful on Leslie.
When is this party going down?
Yeah, that's a good question. What's on the agenda, Malcolm?
Let's just go all the way back. Was there a moment for each of you where a movie, an event, whether it was going to the theater or seeing something on TV, that sparked your interest in the field of costume design? Francine?
I've always been a movie buff, I think, since I was a kid. There was an old movie that came on television called Sayonara. The costumes were just amazing to me. And I loved the imagery of the Japanese culture on the clothing. And I also remember there was another movie, an old Western, that was mainly our Native American neighbors, that was called Cheyenne Autumn. And there was something about the costumes on that were just so authentic. And I think once you have the passion in knowing what that film is about and what that story is also about, I think it also influences you and on how you accomplish or go about creating these costumes. And you're also creating them in a way that you are respecting those, certain people. You are respecting the history of it, different lifestyles, different culture, different people. And you go in so many different realms, so many different eras. It just takes you and all around the world. And that's what I love about it.
Well, similarly, I got into watching a lot of old period films, and I grew up really Christian, so I was only allowed to watch certain movies, and a lot of them were biblical movies. And one of my favorite movies to this day is actually Ben-Hur. And
Yes.
The costumes in Ben-Hur were amazing. And I remember
mine too.
yeah, I remember being a kid and watching that movie over and over and over and over again for the costumes. Another movie that I loved growing up that I used to watch with my grandmother is called Cabin in the Sky. And that one features predominantly Black cast. Lena Horne's in it, and she just looks amazing. And she's supposed to be kind of a floozy type, but she's got this beautiful wrap top on that's like got these giant graphic polka dots, and she puts this flower in her hair, and she just goes and seduces a man. And I just thought she looked so glamorous. Movies like that I watched over and over and over as a child, and not even realizing that I was watching them because I loved the costumes so much. So, you know, I didn't realize it was a career I could do until I moved to New York, actually. And I started seeing things being filmed around the city. And I just asked around until someone would give me a job. And my first job was not paid. And I just worked from there and been in costumes ever since.
I'd love to hear that story of like who opened the doors for you and who your mentors were.
There was a opportunity that was starting in the film industry through affirmative action that were inviting many people of color to come into the industry in really all the different categories behind the camera. And costume design was one of them. I had to attend 4 different studios within a year as an apprentice. I made $100 a week. And after my year as an apprentice, I was hired back at Universal as a stock clerk. And mentors of mine were incredible costume designers like Bernard Johnson, who came in from New York, and Gertha Brock, Violet Jones Faison. At one particular point, the famed Edith Head, I ended up having to work with her. She was definitely a mentor, and it was just an incredible opportunity to do because we were doing space, westerns, everything that you can imagine. When something like Glory was offered to me, and it was a field that, well, does a woman really know how to capture a war film? You know, and I thought, watch me. And then it came about, well, is she too young to do this? Watch me. Being in the arts, I don't think there's any such thing as what color you are, how old you are, what is this about you? Either you are really passionately seeing it and really having your art is the thing that you want to do, then who is it to say that you cannot accomplish it?
Charlese, talk about your journey and your mentors.
I would tell anyone in an earshot what I wanted to do because, you know, I'm a young Black woman from suburban Maryland. No one in my family does the arts. There was no one in my life that was like, hey, this is how you do this thing you want to do. I had to ask a lot of questions and put myself out there. Through asking questions, one of my first jobs came from a connection that I had from Fashion Week. She just happened to be assistant designing a film, and it was a Michael Douglas film called Solitary Man. On that film, I ended up working with and meeting Ella Mirajnik and Jenny Gehring, and that was my first job out. I was interning, I was working for free. And then from there, I worked with David Robinson, and he also taught me a lot. I would say he taught me the most about being a costume designer because I spent a full couple of months as his driver. So I was with him like pretty much all day, every day. I would, you know, sometimes be there when he was doing fittings. Like he taught me a lot about resources in New York City and stuff like that, just by absorbing and, you know, working with him every day. The biggest hurdle, I think, for me is the fact that I wasn't able to secure a mentor. You know, like I would see other people who weren't necessarily my race, you know, mainly white people if I want to be like 100, who were getting kind of like walk through, you know, the steps, you know what I mean? It was like, okay, so now I'm going to take you on this job with me and you'll be my assistant. And then I'm going to take you on this job with me and you'll be my assistant. And then I'm going to give you this job. And now you'll be able to like, you know, be a designer. And so I saw a lot of people around me getting that kind of help and like moving up really quickly. And, you know, I was fine moving at the pace I was moving because I wanted to learn as much as I could. And, you know, I still assist sometimes, you know what I mean? If I feel like I'm going to learn from someone, because that's how I've been able to pursue this career is through assisting, working, being humble. And because there was no one there really to like kind of walk me along, in the process of going from an unpaid assistant to a designer.
And Francine, you came up in the 80s with Sharon Davis, Cece, Ruth Carter. What was it like being in that group of designers?
I had an incredible start going through this industry. It was hard. I'm not saying that it was easy, because at that particular time, we were viewed as people trying to take someone's job away from them. Mm-hmm. And we were educated in the field that we were going into. So I was determined to learn everything about the costume department. There were things that I felt, why do I need to do that? Why do I need to know that? And now I look back and I say, wow, am I glad I did that? Wow, am I glad I was introduced to that? To me, it is an incredible opportunity to be able to work at what you love, to express what you love to do. Even looking at Ruth's Black Panther and Sharon Davis's Ray. I mean, when you start looking at these wonderful creations, to me, it is just an incredible art.
And we just mentioned Ruth Carter. So how did her Oscar win, which was historic, it made the record books. How did that win change things for you, both as costume designers?
She's opened a lot of doors for us. I've definitely seen more people requesting Black designers this year, definitely due to her win, but also partially due to like the social climate and what's happening right now. And people are like becoming more aware of the fact that we exist, and being more intentional about finding us, particularly to tell stories about the diaspora. Even me being considered right now is due to her winning, you know what I mean? And due to her laying this groundwork for all of us. She's been consistently amazing. She's had a really long, really consistent career. I definitely think, people are taking us more seriously and seeing us, because of her win, 100%.
I agree with Charlese. I think Ruth being more out there, I would say, that a lot of people are aware now that we do exist, most definitely exist, but we've always existed. I was been able to be around, like I said, designers like Bernard Johnson and Gertha Brock. I mean, this is years ago. So we have always been there. It's just now, because of certain films that are getting the recognition, and they are seeing who are doing those costumes, and that recognition is being given to and rightfully so, then yes, it is definitely making a difference. There are some people that were surprised that I did Virtuosity, which is a movie that has really nothing to do with certain African American culture. But you have one of the most brilliant people who is still brilliant, Denzel Washington. And he broke down barriers so many years ago. So don't think that just because I may look a certain way or be of a certain color or gender, that I am not able to accomplish that. And that was another reason why I was really wanted to do that movie Glory, because they were feeling, how can a woman accomplish the grittiness of this kind of film? Why would that really totally be an issue? It's called breaking down a lot of barriers, I think. We are in the arts. We are in the costume department. We're costume designers. We can do anything with a costume with fabric.